Are you considering buying a home with a tenant? If so, you might want to know the risk involved. In this video, I'm going to break down a real life story about a buyer who faced a major challenge when purchasing a tenanted property. And I'm also going to talk about what you need to know to protect yourself if you're in a similar situation. Hi there and welcome. For those of you that don't know me, I'm Sonia Ramgobin, realtor with RE/MAX, serving the Durham Region and the GTA. So this article caught my eye right away because it highlights the real risk when buying a property with tenants. It tells a story of a woman who, after buying a home with tenants already living there, found herself homeless when the tenants refused to leave, even after they received an official eviction notice. So it sounds extreme, but it's a situation that can happen. So let me walk you through the details of her story so you understand what went wrong. So after this woman went through some personal challenges, this woman sold her home in Mississauga and downsized to a townhome in Hamilton. The property she bought was occupied by tenants, and the seller had agreed to give the tenants notice to leave so that the buyer could move in. The seller's agent told her that the tenant had agreed to vacate by a specific date, but that didn't happen. The tenant refused to leave, leaving this woman with no choice but to live in her car until she could get the tenants out. Unfortunately, situations like this can happen more often than you think. In Ontario, the rising cost of home ownership has led to an increase in renting. In fact, over 30% of the population in Ontario are renters. So if you're thinking about buying a tenanted property, it would be in your best interest to know what you can do to protect yourself. I'll share some important tips. However, keep in mind that every situation is unique and you should always consult your realtor and a legal professional if you find yourself in this scenario. So tip number one is to include a vacant possession clause. So if you're a buyer and you plan to move into your home, make sure that the agreement of purchase and sale includes a vacant possession clause. This means that the seller is responsible for ensuring that the property is empty and ready for you to move in on closing date. Tip number two is understanding the seller's responsibility. So when selling a tenanted property, the seller must follow the laws when asking tenants to leave. In Ontario, if the property is sold and the buyer intends to move in, the seller must give the tenant at least 60 days written notice using a form called an N12, which is a notice to end tenancy. The closing date should be set far enough in advance to give the tenant enough time to move out. Keep in mind that the N12 form can only be served to tenants on a month-to-month lease. So if a tenant has a fixed-term lease, for example, 1 year, the seller cannot ask them to leave until that lease is expired. So if the tenant moves out on or before the closing date, all is well. But what do you do if the tenant still refuses to leave after being served the N12 notice? So here are a few general options. Remember, each scenario is different, so what works for one person may not work for another. That is why it's always best to talk to a professional in the field to get the best advice for your situation. So with that being said, option number one can be to request an extension. This option allows the buyer to ask the seller for an extension on the closing date while the seller goes through the legal process of evicting the tenant. This process, however, can take months or even a year to resolve. So with that being the case, many buyers aren't willing to wait that long and choose this as an option. Option number two is to walk away from the deal. If you, the buyer, have a clause in your purchase agreement that allows you to cancel the deal, you can walk away and get your deposit back in full. But just remember, these clauses have to be inserted in your purchase of sale, so just be mindful of that. Option number three is to seek damages. So what I mean by this is you, the buyer, could also pursue damages if the seller is unable to deliver the property as promised. This would be in breach of the vacant possession clause in that agreement. Overall, the take-home message is that buying a property with tenants can be tricky, especially if you plan to move in yourself. Buyers and sellers need to understand the risk and the legal process involved. So it's crucial to work with an experienced realtor and have a lawyer review the purchase agreement to ensure both parties are fully protected. One last takeaway that I would like to share with you is that collaboration can help. Well, let me explain. So based on my experience, it goes a long way when landlords try to collaborate with tenants during the selling process. When it comes to letting tenants know you're selling, it's always best to give them ample notice so that the tenant can get prepared. By working together, it might increase the chances that both the landlord and the tenant can find a resolution that suits everyone and make this process much smoother and much easier. I hope this video was helpful. If you know someone who might benefit from this information, please go ahead and share this video. As always, if you have any comments or questions, please feel free to reach out to me. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.